Today we have Professor Subhash Kak, and of course, since it's Wednesday 10 p.m., so certainly Shri Vibhuti Jha. And we are going to talk about a narrative crisis in India, and why we are stuck in 19th century narratives, even in things like sciences, when 20th century narratives can actually help us tide over those quote unquote social sciences dogmas which have been thrust on us. So let's go into the conversation. Before that, I request you to please subscribe and also to go to the description to support us and to follow us. Namaste, everyone, and welcome. Professor Subhash Kak, wonderful having you over there in your dialogue. And let me just introduce the topic. And I came across.
आपकी आवाज बहुत कम हो गई है संजय जी.
Hello, hello,
Suddenly,
hello. Is it okay? Hello.
very weak. Are you feeling the same thing, Subhash ji?
जी हाँ, जी हाँ.
हाँ.
Just, let me check. Check. There's nothing has changed on my side. Just give me a minute. Okay, is it better?
No,
It was fine when we were talking
that's
just
right.
prior to the moment you started.
Okay, and
Getting better.
better.
Yeah, now it's okay.
Okay, let me start. So I was just mentioning that I was reading an article by Professor Subhash Kak, and he mentioned about the Indians still sticking to 19th century narratives, even in the sciences. And what I could guess was that 19th century was the high time of Newtonian physics, and which was dominated by things like linear time and even probably the Judgment Day, because Newton was a great Christian. We know that. And in the 20th century, we had these great breakthroughs like the relativity and the quantum mechanics, which should have actually given great confidence to the Indians, because they were much closer to the ancient narratives that the Indians had. But the Indians seem to have missed the bus. So, can you just give us a lowdown on that, Professor Ka?
Thank you, Sanjay ji, and thanks and welcome to all your listeners. Well, the left in India is inspired by Marx, and Marx's ideas were rooted in the 19th century narratives. And the whole idea was that you are nothing but the body, and then there are these interactions, socialization, so there is hierarchy, and you have to fight that hierarchy and so on. So, this is broadly what the framework is. But 20th century science brings the individual into the picture. For example, in relativity, what you see depends upon where you are. And quantum mechanics, as you pointed out, Sanjay ji, uh, has, according to scholars, is supposed to be completely consistent with Vedanta. And in fact, the creator of quantum mechanics, Erwin Schrödinger, who was an Austrian Vedantist, himself admitted so in his writings that what he was trying to do was to give voice to the very essence of Vedanta. Now, this is all relevant now because in this post-industrial age, in the industrial age, of course, it was all about production and things and objects and so on. In the post-industrial age, information and knowledge comes in, and information and knowledge is also associated with the mind, and that's what is characteristic of the 20th century science. And in fact, one discipline where this hasn't happened, even in the West, is say medicine, because Western medicine or allopathic medicine looks only at the body, while Ayurvedic medicine looks at the mind as well. And now we know that Western medicine is facing a huge crisis, and 70 to 90% of all clinical research cannot be replicated. And now look at American performance to the pandemic. In America, the mortality rate is about 2,700 per million, when in countries of Africa and Asia, it's 20 times less, or 1 over 20th, or even less than that. That's because the way Western medicine is approaching it is not right. But now coming back to India. In India, it's not just the medicine; it's the entire framework uh, where Indian intellectuals are still following colonial ideas. We may have obtained political independence 75 years ago, but we are yet to obtain intellectual independence. And we have become the carriers of water, so to speak, for colonialists. And as we know, colonialism is based on racism. So basically, Indian elite, without being so aware, are perpetuating racist tropes of the 19th century. 19th century was not just Newtonian mechanics, it was also racism. It was the heyday of colonialism. So very strangely, we, after having obtained political independence, have carried on with ideas, and we are perpetuating it. We are doing things which, to the Westerner, to the open-minded Westerner, and there are lots of open-minded people in the West, uh, are absolutely shocking. Just the Constitution, Article 30, there is no equality of all people, and people don't seem to mind it, that temples are not free in education itself, and education prepares the next generation for all the challenges that we don't understand the complexity of. There itself, we are not providing an equal level playing field to every community. And the most shocking thing is that even justices of the Supreme Court are not aware of the absurdity of the situation, because there are some justices who are pushing this woke idea, because now the 19th century ideas have been married to wokeism of the 21st century. So we seem to be having the worst of both the worlds.
Right. Uh, and if we really look at the very definition of the quantum mechanics, which says that superimposition of probability amplitudes, and then we look at the some of the Upanishads, for instance, I think probably third verse of the Ishopanishad, तदेजति तन्नैजति तद्दूरे तद्वन्तिके तदनन्तरस्य सर्वस्य तदु सर्वस्यास्य बाह्यतः. It almost seems as if quantum mechanics is being described in Sanskrit verse, and we do not even seem to know it, let alone be proud of it.
Oh, absolutely. Because you know what the heart of the Upanishads or the Vedas are the paradox, which is at the very basis of reality. And this is the paradox that you mentioned in Ishavasya Upanishad. When you're talking of consciousness, it's smaller than the smallest and larger than the largest, as near as you can imagine or as far as it can be. And such paradox is also at the basis of reality. Newtonian mechanics was simple. It was the whole universe was a clockwork, right? It was machine like. Although even there was a paradox that the observer was outside of Newtonian mechanics, but people didn't pay any attention to it because, as we mentioned before, the 18th or 19th centuries were about conquest, about enslavement of people, of going beyond the borders of Europe and discovering the physical spaces on the other continents. But 21st century is about knowledge and information. It's the century of century related to the internet, where all the information is fingertips away from each individual. And what it does, the way you interact with this information, also transforms you. So there is this possibility of connecting to everybody. And what also one recognizes, and this is also the very heart uh, of the Upanishads and the Vedas, which Indian elite don't seem to get, which is that according to the Vedas, the same Purusha or the same Atma resides within each individual, no matter what their background, whether it's male or female or sex in between, from one community or the other. Every human being is equal. But what the slurs that are being thrown at the Hindus by Indian elite themselves is that Hinduism is all about hierarchy, which is totally contrary to the very heart of Sanatan Dharma, that every individual is equal. And not only that, all sentient beings have the same Atman, because the idea of Vedas is that the same Ishwar resides within each being. Shivoham, the Mahavakya, Shivoham or Soham, that Shiva Aham, I am the Shiva, I am that single consciousness. It's the same consciousness in each individual. Now, what also shocks me is how non-logical people are in Indian studies departments of South Asian departments. And in fact, yeah, I've talked to the leading scholars in the West, and they themselves express dismay at what's going on. And in fact, Stanley Walpert, the famous historian at UCLA, who created the Encyclopedia of India in 2004, he was perplexed also, even though he was one who was himself who had views which were not totally in conformity with that with a lot of people in India. But he was puzzled. So when he created that encyclopedia, he didn't even want to go to many people in South Asia department. So he gave me free play to write on whatever subjects I wanted to. So I wrote in his encyclopedia on topics such as Kashmir or Ashwamedh or Vedic knowledge or music and this and that, because he, just look at the whole thing about hierarchy. Let me come back to it. People quote, these are South Asian studies professors or Indian professors who quote the Purusha Sukta of the Rig Veda, where it's stated that Purush, which is the Atman, the consciousness, the in this anthropomorphic form, the head of the Purush became the Brahman, the arms became the Rajanya or Kshatriya, the thighs became the Vaishya, and the feet became the Shudras. But now, of course, these are general classes in society. In society, there are some people who are doing, say, mental work, intellectual work. There are some others who are soldiers and so on. But what people forget, and this is where the whole question of this strange, bizarre gap in reasoning is, they forget that according to Purusha Sukta, every individual has the same Purush within them. So every individual in different roles in their life every individual, every father is also a teacher to their son or daughter, or they're also working at home, or they're doing this or that. So every individual is a Brahman at certain point in day or in their life, or a Kshatriya. They have to defend their family or their community, or a Vaishya. They have to earn resources or bread and service. Ultimately, which is Shudra, every knowledge can be only obtained through service, through letting go. The moment you're thinking of hierarchy, you cannot obtain knowledge. In fact, this is something that Vedic books, the Shastras speak of again and again, that ahankar is the obstacle to knowledge. The way to knowledge is through seva. And that's why Vishnu resides in the feet. Vishnu is the Adhar, the basis of all of society. And Indian academics don't seem to get it. It's truly, truly bizarre.
Oh,
In
yes.
fact, in fact, let me to conclude this thought. An anthropological journal in Washington D.C. called Mankind Quarterly even asked me to write an essay on caste in 1993. The title of that essay is "Understanding Caste in India," because people just don't seem to get it. A lot of professors don't seem to get it. The whole problem is that European racists, got so marinated in the minds of people who go through these courses that they are totally out of touch with the reality of life in India. Totally out of touch.
Yes, you're absolutely right, and that's why we ask. Sometimes my favorite question to people who throw Purusha Sukta at me, I always ask them. Then, why do we take Charanamrita, for instance, and why not Mukhamrita? And why is it that we touch the feet of the elders and in India and not kiss them mm, like it is current in some of the European and Middle Eastern country? So people have no answer because they just simply don't understand. And even Gita says, I'll just supplement your point only. Samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshwaram vinashyatsu avinashyantam yah pashyati sa pashyati. Or ahamatma gudakesh sarvabhutashaya sthita. It is so transparently clear for anyone who wants to understand it. But somebody who is just approaching it from the point of view of some kind of inherited dogma, he will never be able to get it because he just wants to shut out the real meaning of what Sanatana Dharma is all about. And not only this, I would also like to uh, take you to the influence of early Newtonian and Cartesian physics on the social sciences, where they viewed the universe as a machine and thereby exalted the individual in a different manner. We are also talking about exalting the individual in the manner of uh, Vedanta or Vaisheshika or quantum mechanics. But here they exalt the individual in a manner that individual rights become everything, and that balance, which is brought about by the superposition, which is envisioned in quantum mechanics, is completely lost. And you see that in literature. And you also see that, I think you made a very pertinent remark when I was trying to make a comparison between Urdu poetry and the Indian language poetry. And I think I made a remark that Urdu is excellent in Jumle Baji, but it doesn't have much depth. And I guess that probably comes from this completely different orientation in looking at the world. What's your take?
The Sanatan tradition looks both at the body and the Atman, mind and body, both. So it's not that we are denying that the body exists and we must do whatever needs to be done for the body. And it's like two wings of the bird, both have to flap. And this is something that is being recognized increasingly in the West also even in medicine. In fact, the next big thing that is happening in Western medicine, because they've recognized the big crisis that they're facing, is what is called precision medicine, that you must tailor the intervention to the individual. But now to come back to poetry, and this is something for some of your darshaks or viewers may not know, that I have been doing literature for a long time, and I wanted to be a writer, a poet as a child, but my mother packed me off to do engineering and science, and then that's what I ended up doing for a long time. But I've kept my interest in poetry, and I've written many, many books of poetry as well, both in English and Hindi. Now, in the Indian tradition, aesthetics tradition, there are two approaches to looking at what is great poetry. One is, of course, alankar, right? And the other is dhvani. Alankar is the cleverness associated, and of course, that also requires tremendous ability. And we are also impressed by cleverness. There's and let's say a ice skater dancer, what they do, and that requires cleverness and a lot of training. That is wonderful. Or in music, also there is alankar, which can be fantastic. And so that is one element. But if it's only that, and if it consists only of taking uh, elements of old tropes or phrases or images like moon as your beloved, etc., etc., and you keep on combining them in different ways, it could be interesting when you first come across it, but after some time it becomes tiresome. So now this very great scholar, Anandavardhan, who lived in the 19th century, came up with this idea of dhvani. Uh, and dhvani is the resonance, which is universal, which uplifts you, which takes you to the Atman, right? We are the body, and alankar, outer alankar or cleverness is related to the body. What the eyes can see, but what eyes see are only objects. But what the Atman connects you to is the infinite, is the transcendent. So what has happened in now, there's some great Urdu poetry as well, and some wonderful songs, sentimentality, relation to the beloved in Hindi movies as well. But what I find very tiresome is a lot of progressive Urdu poetry, the so-called revolutionary poetry, which where people talk about, here again, now we're going to destroy these buts and this hijra, and then destruction of idol worshipping people, etc., etc. And these are old images. Now you might try to conflate these idols with existing power, and that's why you are trying to set up a communication with somebody who truly wants universal change. True revolution ultimately is not just the revolution of the outer, it must also be the revolution of the inner, which is totally missed out, because a lot of these writers were were bigots in their own mind. They were clever with words, but they were bigots. They were again looking in terms of, hey, here are these idol worshipping people, and somehow we need to go beyond.
Faz, Ahmad Faz.
Yeah, yeah. Hum dekhenge. It's such bad poetry, and I don't know why it's been raised to the pedestal, as an epitome of something amazing.
Well, he was a Marxist. That's one explanation. Vibhuti would you like to have a go?
I would like to have a go, but I'm really enjoying listening to this. These are one moments when the seeker's dream is satisfied, because, a couple of things which Subhashji said and you said, Sanjayji, they were very, very powerful. Today I feel so vindicated and, you know, receiving, what do you call, endorsement. Because when Subhashji talked about the head, the body, the feet, and everything else, that's exactly how I describe it to the Western audience of mine here. The caste system exists in every country of the world. And I put it in a different perspective that they understand. And that is, everybody who is concerned with the governance is about Brahmin. This is where it comes from. Rules, regulations, the management techniques that you lay down to run the show, if I may say so, is about being a Brahmin. Then there are the hands and the warriors, the entire thing, those who become who serve a community guard or an armed forces. They are the modern warriors. They are willing to give their life to protect us, a community, or the asset. The third are the Vaishyas. So from Adani, Ambani to Bill Gates to the Pan Bidi shop in a restaurant in India, they're all in trade and commerce. They are the modern Baniyas. And the third, last one, is the service providers, the bankers, the travel agents, the accountants, the doctors. We are service providers. We are the modern Shudras. Do we have it or not? And they say, yes, it is. It is the question of understanding the process. There's a whole composite body which is complete. Talking about that, it's something very interesting that science and technology, we have often talked about it, that the biggest support to Sanatan comes from the development of science and technology and understanding of it. You refer to the mind part of it. That's where the mind meditation, wellness, that mind body alignment with the spirit is the reason for us to live a fulfilled life. You can't lead a fulfilled life if you're missing on either one of them. And that's what is important, that wellness has gathered such momentum here. This was, incidentally, you use the word Vardhan. Somebody referred to a name called Vardhan,
Anandavardhan.
Anand Vardhan. And I remember 1983 October when I was in Reserve Bank of India in Bangalore. There was a management consultant at a Harvard guy. I have not found him again, but he said something very powerful at that time. He said, Indians do not need to go to Ivy colleges to study management. The lessons of management are all there in Bhagavad Gita, Ramayana, and Mahabharata. You don't need to go anywhere. Study them. And that's what is important. There was a Pew survey recently done. Pew Research was saying that, religion is fixed, science is evolving. And in their research, in the way included, they talked about the fact that the most of the research is done by the Christian mindset. And in this one, they did also talk to Hindus, Muslims, Buddhists, but they talked in Singapore and Malaysia. That's the interesting part. But the research finding of them was that Hindus find that science and religion has an overlapping sphere. And most of the Hindus can believe that their thought processes have a scientific base to it. That's why Hindus have no problem in accepting the advancement in science, whereas many other faiths have problem in accepting that reality. So next, I have talked about that particular thing. Like the Christians say that the God created the world in 6 days or 7 days, right? And I said, that's what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. It's me. Many centuries ago, prior to that, Muslims have a problem in conforming to that evolution because they believe Allah created the whole world and all the life within. So science and technology is moving. And I think, in my opinion, science and technology is the biggest ally our faith has ever experienced. And we must take full advantage of that. So there's other part which is very important, which I feel that we don't have any centralized authority that mandates or stipulates to do this or to do that. We are all seekers. And I'm enjoying myself here, listening to both of you, is that I'm seeking here. I have no hesitation in confessing I don't know something. It is the beginning point of learning is when you acknowledge to yourself that I don't know it. But that's the first step. Declaring yourself a self-declared ignorant is the first step towards learning. So I'm learning from you. My inquiry is only one, is that in this intersectionality of science and technology, if I may use the word intersectionality,
The
do
big
you
bad
think
word.
do you think that science is overcoming religion, and that's why they have introduced the element of faith in the modern conversation, that faith is the one which determines the quality of science. Is that true?
Well, I don't quite understand your question. Maybe faith, perhaps in the sense in 21st century, more very recently, in terms of these woke ideas that
Yes.
math is racist, and therefore we're going to say it. In fact, there are some scientific journals who are talking about wokeism also, including journals such as Science and Nature, and people are very alarmed. All serious scientists are alarmed, but people are also afraid right now with whatever is going on. And this fear also is a consequence of the fact that wide scale unemployment is inevitable because of AI. You know, most of what we do at our jobs is repetitive, it's based on procedures and rules, and all of those things can be emulated by computers. So there is tremendous fear. There is tremendous fear in social sciences, English professors, other people who, in America, for example, they don't get paid very well. In fact, they get paid even less than, let's say, nanny. I have a 2-year-old granddaughter, and the nanny rate in a city like Miami is say 60, $70,000 a year. A lot of English professors, studying English professors, get 50K or something. So there are not that many things, and all the English professors or humanities or social sciences or anthropology, or many of them, can get unemployed when great when technology is harnessed. You know, you could have great professors, great storytellers in studios in New York City or Washington or Delhi or wherever, teaching all the students everywhere with some tutorial assistants, you know, research assistants at individual locations. So people are fearful at this point, and they are so afraid that they are willing to embrace ideas which are bizarre, like many of these woke ideas, and so these things emerge from a sense of inferiority. And my personal belief is that if India chose the wrong way after 1947, many things, why didn't they see reality as it was? Why didn't they come up with a system e- with equal rights for everybody? You know, while having some means of helping those who are poor, because India was extremely poor, what the British had done in their rule of 150 years was totally ravaged India. From a 25% share of the world economy, we had come down to 1 or 2%. So Indian communities had turned on each other, you know, as they were famines and people were dying. And a lot of what is seen as objectionable in Indian social life, social relationships between communities, is a consequence of that poverty that ensued. Uh, but it's not fundamental to it. But in any event, what the leaders did, because they came from a place of a sense of inferiority, which is what was drummed into them by the English overlords, that we are superior and this is our mission to civilize you Indians, right? And as I mentioned before, in 1918, the Indian Education Service, when it was set up finally by the English, it had 210 employees at the highest level, and 195 of them were English, were British. Only 18 were Indian. They had found only 18 Indians smart enough to do education or do critical thinking. But now look at Indians are everywhere, all over the universities, all over the world. So basically, Indian colonial experience was an experience of a people being really mistreated, being told day in and day out that you're inferior. So these guys who took on power in 1947, having educated, some of them were educated in the West, and this is the experience they had obtained in the West as well. So they started out on the wrong foot. And it's only now I feel that we are trying to find that space where we don't say that we are superior, which is again another of the slur that's being thrown at us, that here you're talking of Hindu supremacy, right? We're not talking of anybody who's superior. Every human being has all the four varnas in them,
Right.
potentially. And society, of course, every society is stratified. Every society where you have specialization of work, unless each individual is, let's say, an itinerant. You're on the step. Everybody is traveling every day, so then everybody is doing everything. But every settled society has stratification, has specialization of function, and that is so in the West as well. But European racists and their Indian followers, as people like Aurobindo and all the great thinkers of India reminded us, are using this as a sledgehammer to beat down on India, not only in India, which is what they've been doing for a long time, but also on Indians in the West. This whole caste thing that has come up. So this is people who themselves, who are either racists or followers of racism, who believe, some of them from other religious traditions which are inimical to India, where there is truly a hierarchy, where they talk of believer and non-believer hierarchy, or ashraf or pasmanda hierarchy. You belong to a certain bloodlines. That's not the case in Sanatan Dharma at all. Every human being, every book proclaims, every human being has the same Purush within them.
Right.
Every human being. And this is the reason why we are also, Sanatan Dharma is about ecology, an ecological approach to reality. That is the meaning of worship of animals. In fact, I remember when I was a small child growing up in Kashmir, and we are not a wealthy family at all. And there was just enough food being cooked, some rice and some sag and so on. Before the family would be served, my mother would take rice balls. She would make them by her hand and take them to the wall outside of the house and put them on top of the wall so that birds could eat it. That this whole idea of connection with all creatures is inherent to Sanatan Dharma, and the cow became a symbol of it. Go, or gau, in Sanskrit is also a name for earth. Even in Greek, ancient Greek, Gaia, the Gaia hypothesis, Gaia is the earth cow. So the word gau means earth. It also means the cow, which is a symbol of the earth. So this is the whole idea, that you are supposed to love the earth. And this is another of those slurs that is thrown at us. You are, I think, a parliamentarian just last week, parliamentarian from one of the parties from Bengal in New Delhi, in her speech called "The Hindus Go Mutra Drinkers." India,
That's now a fashion in the West as well.
yeah. So this is what is being done. It's something that happened even in Rome, when Christianity was trying to destroy the earlier Roman religion. They would call the Roman religion people as that they would eat up children and so on. These slurs were used. These are slurs which are also used um, right now in political discourse. If you stand up against the racists or the colonialists, they would say you're a fascist. So fascist is one of those slurs. And perhaps in the West, the word fascism has some power, right? Because they have experience of still memory, at least through the books that they read, of Mussolini and Hitler. But I'm so amused when in Delhi these the would-be revolutionaries go to the villages and say Fashivad. These guys don't even understand what Fashivad means. They think that maybe it's a nice thing, maybe it's some kind of an ice cream. That these are the people who eat a certain kind of ice cream. There's such a disconnect from reality. It's absolutely shocking. Absolutely shocking.
But yes, that disconnect, of course, is also reflected in the kind of results that they are having, and the kind of speeches our good friend, whom I spoof quite often, makes. So that disconnect is very, very obvious. And in fact, the Prime Minister made a very good point when he said that their mind space is completely captured by the left. And I might add that the Indian left's mind space is completely captured by the 19th century ideas that you refer to.
Oh, absolutely. What they have to do, it's not to say that we hate the West. We love the West as well. We want development. We love science, as already mentioned, because the Vedas are both about apara and paravidya. Apara are the outside sciences. We embrace all of those sciences. We embrace evolution. In fact, that's a part of Hindu thought, evolution. You read the Puranas, there's talk of how the earth, the whole universe has evolved from Srishti in different ways over billions of years. And it's a coincidence that age seems to correspond to modern estimates of the age of the universe. So there are all of those things. But what's really happened is, and it's so tragic, that after 1947, we allowed people who were, if I may use a very strong term, were sort of blind. We have allowed these blind people to lead the nation. And this blindness, this is, they have eyes, but they cannot see. You know, just eyes are not enough. Physical eyes are not enough. One of the Upanishads says, what is it that lies behind the eyes, which makes it possible for you to see? And
Right.
this is what is missing, because if your knowledge is bookish, which is what sadly the system that developed in India, curricula, everything else, that over 3 generations, now we have created young people and they have passion, but we haven't taught them how to see. And they therefore go around and talk in manner which people don't understand at all. They go to the village, and the reason why they have had some success earlier on was because they controlled everything. They control PR, Doordarshan, All India Akashvani, this and that, all the books. And if you are told that this is all there is, it's like what is happening to the Vokes in North America. Then you think that that's what reality is. But now that spell has been broken. You have the social media, you have Jaipur dialogues, and other many such similar platforms. And the old university is dying all over. The brick and mortar university is dying in the West also. So we need to create new institutions for this, not because it's Indian or it's Vedic or it is connected to us, but because it's universal. What the Vedas talk about, what the Upanishads talk about, is nothing sectarian. It's not saying that you are superior or you're inferior, that this message is only for us and not for you. What the Vedas are talking about is universal knowledge, because every sentient being, certainly every human being, has the same Atman. So, this is the way you can get on a journey so that you will then understand yourself. That's beautiful. That embraces everybody. And such a uplifting message is being attacked by the enemies who are stuck in the 19th century science, right? In the 19th century narratives. And so they need to be awakened. So the whole challenge, I think, is because if they were really to get a sense of it, I hope that there are some people who hate Jaipur dialogues are listening to find out what is happening, that they would then go out and try to find out what is it all about. Did Erwin Schrödinger, the creator of quantum mechanics, on which all of modern sciences are based, all of ICs, computers, what you have, biology, chemistry is based on quantum mechanics. Please confirm if you are listening, you hate JD. Please confirm, just Google it, and you will come across this line by Erwin Schrödinger, who continually speaks about how he was guided by the Upanishads, how I am Atma. Brahma was this Mahavakya which gave him the central idea. But that apart, in his great book, What is Life, which played a central role in transforming Francis Crick, who was the co discoverer of the DNA code. And Francis Crick writes about it. It made Francis Crick switch from physics to biology. In What is Life, Schrödinger very clearly says, he says, look, the Western thought says every person's soul is different, right? And but the Vedic idea, which would be appear blasphemy to the Western mind, is that there is a single consciousness in all beings. There is the same Atman in all beings. And he says in this book, and I'm paraphrasing him, he says, even the Westerner, when two lovers are looking into each other's eyes, at that point, they know that they are one. Then they're transcended their physical bodies, and that is really the truth. That is the deepest truth. And of course, um, the whole Sanatan Dharma Shastras, which the blind people who led India 75 years ago, they put them out, they threw them out of the window. They said, this is all religion, and we don't do religion. They threw out the most extraordinary knowledge that there is, which everybody in the West, the greatest scientists, artists, scholars are connected to. And in fact, the most popular, self-help, new age, psychology, whatever programs that you have, or in the universities, what people are looking for, deep knowledge is what Sanatan Dharma is. It's not a religion, it is knowledge. That is what the
Exactly.
Vedas say.
Exactly.
This is Vidya. Ved means knowledge, right? And you have Atma Vidya. You have of one aspect of it, which is apara, which is outer knowledge, and the other is para, which is this deep knowledge of the self. And apara, we embrace all of Western sciences. We embrace all of whatever has been discovered, because that is a part of apara. And a lot of that actually sits on top of what was done in India, because India was the most advanced scientific nation until 2 or 3 centuries ago. And then, of course, India fell on hard times, and we had to try hard just to survive. Um, but we have triumphed. We have triumphed because now all over the world, 100 years ago, it was only in esoteric circles, people who were studying philosophy, etc., Voltaire or de Saussure or whosoever. But now the common person in every corner of the world, I travel quite a bit. You go to whatever country, every small town has its own yoga studio. And what is yoga? Yoga is lived Sanatan Dharma. Yoga is one of the 6 darshanas. The other 5 darshanas are reflections on what the reality is. Yoga is the darshana or darshan which addresses this whole question of how life is to be lived. And you can either do it if you're focusing on asanas, there are many books on that, but certainly Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. But the greatest book of yoga is the book on which Sanjay ji has written. This is Bhagavad Gita. That is the greatest book of yoga, which is where Krishna speaks of different kinds of yogas, which, depending upon what your temperament is, you will do one or the other, right? If your temperament is service, you will do karma yoga, right? Doctors are the Shudras, or politicians are the Shudras. That is the karma yoga. If it's more of emotion, then you will do bhakti yoga. If it's more of reflection, then it'll be something dhyana yoga and so on. So the greatest book of yoga is everywhere. If you were to ask me, what is truly the knowledge base in the United States, and that'll be true of Europe as well. There was this lady, I forget her name. She was the religion editor of Newsweek, who about 10, 15 years ago wrote a famous column in Newsweek saying, "We are all Hindus now." She was talking about America. And basically, what she was trying to say is that Sanatan ideas have already conquered the West. So the reason why people don't stand up and say that we are Sanatanis or we are Hindus is because of all the hammer attacks that Hinduism is hierarchy, Hinduism is patriarchy, Hinduism is caste, which is all these things are false. But that is what is hammered day in and day out because people are afraid. Earlier on, they were leaving Hindus alone, but now Hindus are the most prosperous community in America, right? Or go wherever they are, not because they're superior, because I truly believe all human beings are equal. That's because these Sanatan ideas, these are universal ideas. If you are raised in them, they empower you. You are able to relate to others. Why are Indians such great managers? Why are they becoming CEOs of all companies or more and more companies all over the world? And as you said, Vibhuti Ji, the guy in Bangalore who talked about Bhagavad Gita as the great manual for management, is something that everybody learns without even doing anything. I think this is why intuitively, and we want to give it to everybody. We want to share it with everybody. Everybody, please come in and join our large tent under the skies. And this is the tent of Sanatan knowledge, right? Universal knowledge. We embrace everybody. Everybody's equal. You will not be put into any specific bad caste. Caste is not a Sanskrit word at all. Caste, there's no word for caste in any Indian language. The word is jati, and you will be whatever jati you are. You will be Italian or German, that'll be your jati, right? But, and everybody
Manav Jati
have
for
all
that
the pronouns in them.
Right. It's so fascinating to hear you because I'm really emboldened and encouraged with what you have said, Subhashi, because, one of the things which I find that how Hindus have been able to adjust anywhere are not a law and order problem everywhere because there is an inherent thing in our belief system that science and our way of life is overlapping. And that's how we are able to embrace all changes that come to us. We adjust the fastest. And that is what is important, that a lot of our learning, a lot of our concepts were proven later by science. And two simplest of examples that I can recall immediately is use of turmeric. Use of turmeric and copper, you know, in the vessels. We all know that because both have antimicrobial properties. This is what is important for the rest of the world to know. And that's why they are embracing Sanatan principle. I would love to know see the article, that Newsweek thing that you talked about, because that's what you use the word fear. The organized religion fears is based on fear, ignorance, and gullibility of people, whereas we are not. We may suffer. I mean, you talked about the 49, 40s post-independence people were the people who became our leaders, where they were, they were blind. And in our management work, we say when you are blind, the leader's biggest suffering is when he becomes blind to his blindness.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's this
Absolutely.
famous.
And you become, thus you suffer from a severe case of educated incapacity, a phrase Sanjay ji loves a lot. When you suffer from educated incapacity because you seem to know, yet know nothing. That's the biggest challenge. That's why I feel in my leadership role of a major company here. So we experienced that. But there was also, when I landed here, I was told by director, HR, international director, that we love you Indians because you do hard work and you are so calm about it. So there was amazing recognition of our contribution, we ourselves not realizing or claiming it. But I think now must take advantage of science and technology to spread the word. It is also very important. If we don't talk about ourselves and our philosophy, then it is others who define us. So
Oh, absolutely. In fact, there is this poem which says, "He who knows not and knows he knows not, he is simple, teach him." For a person to learn, the first thing, and you mentioned that already, for a person to be able to learn is to first recognize that they don't know something. And but then curiously, this potential to learn exists within each individual.
right.
There's also this other line in this poem which says, "He who knows and knows not he knows, he is asleep, wake him." Right? But then, he who knows and knows he knows, he is wise, follow him. So I think the reason why there are all these amazing um pieces of knowledge that we have in the shastras, and I've done a lot of research also on this and published a lot of stuff on this, is because consciousness is a part of reality. In the Western progressive ideology, consciousness, or in the scientific view of looking at things also, consciousness arose in out from the complexity of the brain as matter evolved, right? But if the idea of consciousness is already inherent in reality, then one can also take the position that consciousness was already there before the matter evolved, and that's the Vedantin position. In fact, the Vedantic position is that the underlying reality is consciousness, and it's out of consciousness that the physical universe emerges. And therefore, we should be surprised why the rishis foresaw so much of stuff. Now, of course, when you're talking of copper utensils or turmeric, that's the Vadyas, in Ayurvedic tradition, in Charak Samhita or Sushruta Samhita, um, when when they Vadya finally got his imprint that he had qualified, and it was called the third birth. The twice born and the thrice born. The Vadya was supposed to be thrice born, but in any event, he was enjoined also to go out and do experiments and be looking upon. It's an empirical thing. We're supposed to be looking around and observing, because the greatest teacher is Prakriti. Prakriti is also goddess, right? Ultimately, even all the worshippers of the so-called male god, which is another slur thrown at us. Here you're only worshipping Shiva or Vishnu. Even the greatest worshipper of Shiva, Adi Shankaracharya, wrote Saundarya Lahari, right? That ultimately the path to any divinity is through the goddess. And goddess is, of course, the outer nature. Prakriti is a goddess, but also the inner nature. That is why you turn inside, and the goddess teaches you. And therefore, ultimately, all the knowledge is already present within you. It's covered. It's covered because of the sanskars you went through, that you didn't receive the proper shiksha instruction to learn how to do that uncovering. But you can do it, and every human being can do it. Every human being is redeemable. Every human being can obtain moksha or mukti. That is the heart of Sanatana Dharma. That is the heart of the Veda. And I think this is amazing. This is liberating for every human being. It is it's just the opposite of whatever is taught about India in colleges and universities. Totally opposite, because these people don't get it. And I mentioned this before in my talks, and I'm paraphrasing Ananda Kumaraswamy. In his book, Hinduism and Buddhism, he says, whatever is written about Hinduism in textbooks, uh, after 150 years of the research that English or British or Western European Indologists did, and what their Indian followers have done, whatever is written about Hinduism is wrong. It's opposite to what is written. And we have followed these guys after 1947. You're writing about Max Bueller or Keith or Dumont and so on. They just don't get it. And that's all that's being taught. That and the further elaborations of these false theories. And what we have done basically is, we, a free people, we have allowed ourselves to be handcuffed. That's one image. Or you could say that we have allowed ourselves to put, जैसे वो द्रौपदी है, sorry, not Draupadi, Gandhari.
Gandhari.
Like
Okay.
Gandhari, all of India has become Gandhari. We are not seeing reality as it is. And that is tragic. What we need, because all of India has become Gandhari, more or less, and there are people who are fighting it now, the Arjunas and and of course there's Krishna guiding everybody. So we need this guidance right now to throw away these scales from our eyes and see us for what we are. I think that's what's required.
Thank you. I think it's time to go to the audience questions. Just make one remark is that the basic reason, I think one of the basic reasons that people don't get it, even the Indians don't get it, is because they don't understand our epistemology. They don't realize that we had Pratyaksha Pramana as the highest Pramana, and that is why there was never any kind of conflict between the Indian knowledge systems and science. Whereas in the West, they had to separate it because they were following a dogma. Okay, then with that point, we move to the question answers. Atul Sharma, why no talks on Punjab Hindu massacres? There was a talk, I think 16th December with Puneet Sani. You can just go through the timeline of Jaipur Dialogues and you will find that. Next. Apurva Podar, thank you. Achintyanatha Saxena, to the best of my knowledge, Go also means prosperity. Go Raksha started to prevent invaders from looting livestock because in agrarian economy, livestock was more important than gold as wealth.
In Yaska's Nirukta, there are 8 or 10 different meanings of the word go or gao. And the very first is not the cow, the very first is Earth, planet Earth. And then you have the cow, then you also have the senses, right? And so on and so forth. So there a whole series, and you can look that up because there are many. Even I have written an essay on all the different meanings of the word go. That's why you have Goswami. A Goswami is not the owner, the swami of a cow. Goswami is the master of the senses, right? So that's why a wise person can be called a Goswami.
Right. Next. Achintyanat Saxena. By definition, a narrative is a story that may or may not have factual basis. Isn't it a tragedy that as technology is advancing, human society is moving into fantasies rather than factual knowledge?
Well, I, I don't know whether we are moving into fantasies, maybe because having seen or explored the outer world, now there is in the West, perhaps what you're referring to is maybe Hollywood with all the emphasis on fantasy movies and Matrix and this and that. That's because the ordinary experienced life in the West, at least as taught in the mainstream, is only about the body, and people are craving for a deeper meaning. Because if you are only bodies, and the bodies are going to pass on, they're going to die, then what's the meaning of life? That's not what Sanatan Dharma is all about. There is the body, of course, we do acknowledge it, but there is also the Atman, and that's what people are looking for. And that's why this whole search for something more, which used to be expressed in an indirect way, in a coded way, in terms of myth, in terms of mythological stories. Now, the West doesn't have that. And that is the reason why they are trying to discover or find or create new fantasies or new myths.
Okay, next one. Next question, please. Thakur Rohit Jayaraj Singh. You must do a session on Mayamatam, ancient construction technology that uses Ayurvedic paste as cement. West might put their label on it as bacteria based cement. Any ideas?
Uh, well, I don't know about Maya Matam myself. I thought Maya was normally the architect, the mythical architect that we have, and there are some people who then speak of conflating it with the Mayan people, but I don't know about Maya Matam. This is one text I'm not aware of, and maybe we should explore it and see what is there in it.
Okay, next. Harshad Malvi. The sad reality is common Indians are themselves unaware of the fact that ours is the only major surviving nature science based tradition and hence is scientific. I myself educate many almost every day.
Oh, absolutely. All the ancient cultures and civilizations are dead. What you have in Egypt is not has no connection with the old Egyptian tradition, and Egyptian tradition has some very good stuff. The Egyptian Book of the Dead has some very interesting stuff in it. Or modern Chinese, well, they're connected in some sense to Confucius and to Taoism, but not in a vital sense because they made a break. They have made a break with their Buddhist past as well, and as communists, because now they're focused only on material prosperity, even though in their Buddhist temples in China and Japan and Korea, they chant in Sanskrit. If you didn't know it, they chant the Nilakanta Dharani every day. So people don't know it, they chant, but you're right. India is the only one. The Mesopotamia, another ancient civilization, totally alienated from their past. Then you have the Inca or the Mayan, the New World civilizations, which were totally destroyed by the conquistadores when the Europeans they came in. So India is the only ancient tradition that is lives on, which is one of the reasons why it's also under attack, particular attack.
Right. Next one. Achintyanat Saxena recently got to know that the Tantra Shastras recognize Vedic Asuri forms of worship of gods as equal to Vedic. Can Professor Kak shed some light on it?
Oh, absolutely. In 2002, I wrote a book called The Gods Within, where I argued and I looked at it from both the perspective of the Vedic text and neuroscience, that the various devatas or devas are the cognitive centers in the mind. And now within the mind are not just the devas, but also the asuras. And the asuras are those centers associated with materiality. And what is required, the famous Samudra Manthan that we need is a manthan between the Asuric and the Daivik aspects of our life to obtain true anubhuti, to obtain siddhi, comes from that manthan. And so Asuri forms are within us. You don't worship them. I mean, you have to do a proper manthan of the Asuric and the Daivik. And certainly out of that comes insight. Because materiality is an aspect of reality. You cannot say that I'm only senses. If you did that, there'll be disaster. So you need proper balance. That's what the Vedas are all about. Proper balance. You worship the cow as a symbol of the whole earth, of all of life. But you may not. You don't have to. I mean, you may worship something else. That's perfectly fine.
Okay, next one. Harshad Malve, also long pending request. Please invite Shri Parveen Mohanji with Subhashji and Nileshji for such topics, ancient knowledge systems. Well, I don't have his contact. If you can help me with it, and then maybe I'll approach him. Next, Kolyar Rus. Hindus are in grave risk nowadays. They always were under grave risk. So they are even today. Uh, Next, Aniruddha Nambi. Can jatis be used to unite the Hindu society instead of viewing it as a divisive force? After all, commerce between groups unite them while politics divides.
Wonderful point. Jatis are living reality. We cannot but be a part of jati. Every jati is equal. What I'm saying is that the way jativad is being used in India as a term um, which is derogatory. I think Jativad is bad if you're using it in a corrupt way. If you only want to help somebody from your jati, that should not be the case. We should treat every human being as equal. But jatis should be embraced. We should embrace every jati as equal, and that can truly unite Hindu society. So I think it's a very, very subtle and wonderful point.
Okay, next. Aniruddhan Nambi again. There are some recent studies indicating that there are specific genetic traits in each caste group. Should we relook caste as an evolutionary survival advantage also than only as societal hierarchy?
Well, this new field in biology called epigenetics. You have the DNA, but DNA is not all. What we also inherit is the epigenome, and epigenome communicates or transmits to us the attitudes, the fears, and other aspects of the personality of our ancestors, at least for 4, 5, 6 generations, and in some lower animals up to 20 or 30 generations. So we are also a sum total of things that have come down to us, not just physically, DNA, but in terms of attitudes and so on. But then just look at this. Every jati in India is was proud and should be proud of their past. If there were certain jatis, for example, I was listening to this wonderful Jaipur dialogue show the other day, where it was pointed out that the state which has the largest number of Dalits is Punjab, 20 or 25%. Why is it so
32%.
large?
32%.
Because Punjab was the place where a lot of warfare was taking place, right? And many communities or defeated soldiers, those communities were then cast out because of the competition, famines, and this and that, and they became the poorer communities, or if they were doing animal trade, etc., etc. But every jati within its own confines is proud of having survived. The jati which was on tough times, which were cast out, they were soldiers, and they have survived. I think they are great survivors. They're fantastic. They have within them capacities which are totally unique, and they should be proud of it. And now, of course, everything is open, everybody on a level playing field. They would have certain advantages which those who did not have it so hard may not possess. So now, in this global village, people from jatis which were traditionally disadvantaged may have special abilities for having within their epigenome capacities which are unique. So
If I
these,
may add quickly in this one, this US is a classic example. Subhaji will immediately testify to that. That we are all made up of our DNA and societies that we live in, and we each one of us have different abilities, different traits, different characteristics which are unique to us. Look at black sports and music industry, how they have thrown out the whites from the basketball, and the National Football League of the Super Bowl will be played this time is dominated by blacks. They have begun to assert themselves with their talent, their abilities. Michael Jackson, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, they didn't have to go to school to fulfill their inherent talent and abilities. So, and traits that are there. So, yes, you are totally right. The identification of that trait is key. We all have a talent. I
and
can't
no,
be X, I can't be Y. I am who I am. And that's what
yeah,
is important to
each one
know.
of us is unique, and not only
Yes,
that, African Americans have not done well only in sports. Some of the
that's right.
greatest speakers, some
Yes,
of the greatest speakers are African Americans.
right.
So, and some of the most handed speakers are white Americans. Some of the most bizarre politicians right now at the very top of the hierarchy, and you wonder they are so clueless. So it doesn't really matter what
Yeah.
race one is from. Every human being is unique. Every human being has amazing potential. And sometimes they don't get an opportunity to develop that. And in Sanatan Dharma, one of the Mahavakya was Aham Brahmasmi. I
Correct.
am Brahman. I am as good as anybody. I think that's a fantastic way to inspire oneself.
That's
These
right.
are things for inspiration. And every human being should be able to say that.
Ability to speak, Obama and Biden. There
Okay,
you
let's
go.
move to the next
Absolutely.
question, Vibhuti ji.
Yes.
Let's
Yeah,
move
yeah,
to the
sure.
next question. Apur Podar, thank you. Mithilesh Kumar, the complex theories of caste and varna are not understood well even by Hindus, let alone Westerners. Caste based discrimination and atrocities on Dalits are real and very often in news. Should not Hindu intellectuals make all effort to eliminate them rather than explaining Varna system to Westerners?
Okay, yeah, but the whole problem is that Hindu intellectuals are not open. In India, we have a burden of 3 generations of brainwashing, and that's what is required to change everything. And maybe, hopefully, Jaipur Dialogues is doing some of that cleaning of that brainwashing.
Next, Hiranmoy Isor question is to Professor Subhash Kak. I, as a Kshatriya future scientist entrepreneur, want you to be my co-thesis writer in my R&D. Your views.
Well, you will have to write to me separately on this, privately on this.
Okay, next. Chaitanya suggests I would like to see a replica of Pandav castle built by Maya Suru, that is, in Indraprastha from your team. Maybe we can show our architectural beauty there and emphasize on architecture as a narrative.
Okay.
Achintyanat Saxena, sir, I was told that Asuri is the method of worship distinct from Vedic method, but worships same gods like Lord Shiva, Vishnu, Devi, etc. Idea being that all yonis worship same god in their own way.
Just some more clarification. Since everything is within us, the Brahman is within us, the Asuras and the Devas are within us. Depending upon your temperament, we are all different. We are 5 siblings in my family, for example, and the 5 of us are all different, even though one would presume that they were raised by our parents in the same way. So we have different, because of temperament. There are some, if you just want to box, you want to do boxing, and that's your sadhana. You want to push it, or malla yuddha, right? You are a wrestler, whatever. Through anything that you want to do, you can, if you go deep into it, you can obtain extraordinary wisdom. You can advance no matter what your sadhana is. As an artist, as a farmer, as a person doing seva, ordinary seva. So, in fact, the story goes that some of the deepest in old society, there used to be servants in homes, uh, in joint families, and some of these servants would appear rather foolish and so on, but they had the most extraordinary wisdom. People knew it. They would pretend not to know, even no matter what one's role in life is, because that is a consequence of accident of one or the other. The point in history where a society is, point in history where one's own family is, and any role, one can find ways of sadhana which will take you forward. And that sadhana could be a path where you are worshipping materiality. That's what asuric worship means, worshipping materiality or power. If you are worshipping power by itself, but the more you do dhyan on what power is, you will then be able to transcend that and obtain wisdom. So there can be many different paths. I agree.
Right. Okay, next. Sham Sundar Iyer, in what ways can one try to contribute in undoing the systematic devastation of our temple ecosystem, not just within our nation's boundary, but everywhere?
This is so tragic. Our temples are still not free. India is not a free country in many different ways. Our temples are not free. Our education is not free. Before the coming of the British, the temples were also schools and colleges. Now we are not allowed. I think there's something in our legal framework that temples are not even allowed to do all of that. And all the great temples of South, for example, can do is provide one function, namely the function of giving comfort to the yatris, right? They come and they see the deity and they do their namaskar and go out in 2 seconds, as in Tirupati. But they don't do the rest of the stuff that was a part of the ecology of the temple, of the Devasthanams. So we have many fights to fight. Our justices are woke. And as somebody has said, nobody is given freedom just like that. Everybody must fight to obtain that freedom. Even in the courtroom, you have to make your case repeatedly. You may be rebuffed once or twice. And we have many battles ahead for us as a people.
All right. Next one. Achintya another section. For example, the way Ravana worshipped Shiva or Narakasur to Kamakhya. Recently, Puri Shankaracharya also said that Asuras are those who misused power and Rakshasa those Rakshaks who became Bhakshaks.
Oh yeah, these are hand waving, but you go back to the Vedas. Asuras and the devas are within. They are a part of reality. Power is a part of reality. Outer power is also a part of reality, right? You cannot. Everybody cannot be equal. The whole idea of everything is equal means nothing. There's no life and meaning. All of these are aspects of reality, and you can use either of them. But of course, there is something called a certain aspect which emerges out of asuric power, which could be the rakshasi force, where you want to grab things, you want to abduct women, you want to do that. That's all rakshasi. You want to destroy things. And but but then, ultimately, through the Vedic way, if we present, it's like light. Shiva, another name for Shiva is Prakash, and another name for Prakriti is Vimarsha. The more this light falls on every place, people get the capacity to transform themselves. So we want Sanatan Dharma to be the transforming force, that even the Rakshasas can be saved, and certainly the Asuras can be saved. Because while you may have in your social life have to exert power, you're a general, you must exert power because that's what you're supposed to do. That's one aspect of physical reality. But what we want to do, what Sanatan Dharma needs to do, is to bring this light to everybody so that everybody is able to obtain moksha.
All right. Next one. Chaitanya, sir, why don't we make jati as movable rather stuck from birth? That if person moves from low to middle income, then he'll move to a new caste, or if he moves to a new job, or his jatis will change. Complete
Oh, well,
confusion.
I
People
think,
mixing up caste, jati, and
yeah,
varna.
Chaitanya ji, you have conflated certain things. Jati is just your family, your ancestors. You can't change what is in the past. We are at the bottom of the tree. You can't change the past, but certainly you can marry anybody you want, and then you will have your offspring. Jati is your lineage. You can't change the past, but you can transform it to whatever. Anybody can become a doctor, and then the jati would be that of a doctor. In Southeast Asia, in Champa, in Vietnam, uh, then after which the great Champa kingdom was known, which was a Vedic kingdom. They worshipped Harihara. Now, what happened 400-500 years ago? A lot of the charms, they're called charms now, embraced Islam. About 85% embraced Islam. 15% still are Hindus. But they call them, and they look like other chams, they look like Vietnamese, but they call themselves Brahmins or Balamons, right? So anybody can be whatever. You can, no matter what your background is, you, if you want to embrace as a familial ideal, one aspect of life. If you all want to be doctors, then of course you'd be, if you wanted to call it, actually these varnas, as I have said, I truly believe in it. Every individual has all the four varnas in them, because in every individual, purusha purush resides, same atman resides.
Ji. Next. Durva Mai, can you elaborate on Saundarya Lahari and its importance in Kashmiri households?
Yeah, well, in Kashmir Shaivism, the whole one of the ways you worship the goddess is through beauty. You have Lalita Tripura Sundari, uh, at the very center of the Sri Vidya, which is a representation of the outer physical reality or inner reality, resides Lalita Tripura Sundari. So, one way to obtain deep understanding is through vimarsh, of course, is also reflection, is vimarsh on anything, vimarsh on what is art, what is this music, I liked it. We like, instinctively we might like some music, but the more you think about it, that takes you deeper, inner, to the very inner core of your being, which is where Shiva resides, or where Shiva and Shakti come together, the samavai of the two. And that provides a journey path for you to obtain your true self, because each one of us is truly unique. There is a special destiny for each human being. And if a lot of people are unhappy, or if 100,000 people in the United States are killing themselves every year, these are well built, good people, good looking people, because they have been disconnected, alienated from that path, which will take them to that unique ability, expression that this person has. So Saundarya Lahari is one way of connecting to the goddess within, the processes within which represent that path.
Right. Next. Okay, so we come to the end of the session. I think there's a lot of interaction, a lot of questions, and that always happens when Professor Subhash Kak is there. So thank you very much, Professor Subhash Kak. Thank you, Vibhuti Ji. Thank you, all viewers. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.
Thank you, Vibhuti ji and Sanjay ji. Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.